Hi everyone, welcome to Between the Lines, where we dig into what's said, what's heard, and perhaps what the truth is. I'm Steve Lombardo, and I'm the CEO of Adfero, and I'm your host. And today we're joined by Steve Clemons. Steve, you are the editor at large of the National Interest and a host of the Bottom Line Al Jazeera English. You are a longtime political commentator and media leader with past roles in The Hill, The Atlantic, I'm only listing a few of these, Quartz, and the founder of the Washington Note.
Right.
So really happy to have you here and appreciate it. You worked for a United States Senator. The media, you've been a journalist, you've been a reporter, you've been an editor. You've started businesses or startups. And so you've got there's a lot of inputs there. How has that helped you in your career and to see things differently?
I think that the real challenge in a place like Washington that is full of jaded people who think they've seen it all and done it all and heard it all is how do you continue to differentiate content in a crowded place? You know, and I think one of the things I've often thought about, whether it was at a think tank like New America or at the Atlantic, where I was very proud that a woman named Elizabeth Baker Keffer and I really launched and gave birth to the whole 3D journalism business. So the live business, you see the New York Times, Semaphore, Politico, Axios, MSNBC, wherever it may be, was essentially mimicked what we did at Atlantic Live, which was to bring journalism live on stage with sponsors and turned it into a big revenue source. So there was an element of that, and that used to be cool. Now it's a cookie cutter business and highly commoditized. But you know, when you're in this and you're basically saying, how do I get people's brains turned on? This is like where I think I differ from a lot of folks. I always want to sort of stimulate people to think more broadly than they might otherwise do.
Why the national interest?
So the national interest was remains a very famous, distinguished journal, largely of foreign affairs, but also politics. I thought that journal, thinking about America's equities in the world and what we should be thinking about and how to discipline one's thinking, because you couldn't be everywhere. I mean, I think there are constraints on any major policy choice, economic, national security, and so the national interest became, so I helped lay the early groundwork for bringing that to the center. So I become editor, I've been an editor at large of everything. When I decided that I had been in this editorial events industry a long time, I created a company called Widehall that does public affairs events, but it's kind of deflagged. It's not a media operation. I want an editorial oar in the water, and the most comfortable one I could have with which I wouldn't have editorial conflicts, given what I'm doing, is the national interest. So I went back to them and I said, hey, I helped you guys at the beginning. Would you be interested in having my voice back? And they immediately made me a contributing editor. And then the editor and then the sort of publisher, you know, Paul Saunders and Jacob Halbrand said, you're doing a good job. Let's make you editor at large. so that's how I got it.
That's fantastic. The publication and all of its the thinking that goes around that is based on the idea that people are still interested in long form and detail. How does that jive with what we're seeing, decreasing attention spans, where people want things shorter, faster?
I think the national interest is a very good crew. Like many, it's nothing unusual, but has a very good crew that's able to distill a smart piece down into a few lines, photos, etc., and place them out in social media. Say we do, you know, 900 to 1,500 words. That's not going to kill someone, but it's still longer than the attention span of most people. So I think where we differentiate ourselves in that space, and I think everyone has to play, if we were trying to create a grassroots publication about politics and foreign policy, we wouldn't create the format now that we have for national interests. I am interested in those, and I have to play in all these areas because I'm not just at the national interest. I'm driving content in a lot of different places. You know, video, social media platforms, web-based platforms and blogging, etc. And so brevity is everything. Getting deep engagement from other players out there, because you can't just broadcast in this world. You have to engage. You have to have you have to have feedback, and you have to interact with people if you're going to. In other words, it's a performance in social media, not just a one-way broadcast.
Let's talk about AI. Here at Adfero, we're obviously, that's something we pay close attention to, that we're using both to help us help our clients and also help guide our clients on that issue. AI has, it is, as I say, everything, everywhere, all at once. What is the most promising thing from a media perspective that AI brings that you're really excited about?
I think what AI does is it aggregates massive amounts of information, knowledge, experience, context at such a staggering degree that no human being has that ability. So it is creating a reservoir of information, which I guess Google was kind of doing, but not quite there. But then on top of it, it's thinking through and processing that at lightning speed. It's helping you not only understand what the answers are to questions you might have, it's helping you to think better. It's helping you to think around corners. It's helping you to do processing.
What is next in terms of communicating effectively so that people think and believe what you're saying? And they accept it, because right now it's almost like you can just discount anything anybody says if you want it.
In my view, the most important lesson to learn in this time, and I don't think this time will remain, I don't think the way gravity around media today is how gravity around media will be in 5 or 10 years. We're in a period of chaos, of might makes right journalism, of mafia bosses in news, competing against one another. When you talked about truth a moment ago, it's sort of interesting. Truth has become a negotiation, right? And so how powerful you are, and you also have to remember that whatever you may call a truth, some element out there is something that's felt and seen differently by everyone. So I think that one of the really important elements when you're in the media is to understand, and I think it's there, is to keep open the fact that you're not trying to bludgeon people with a version of truth that they believe is there.
So let me ask you about, a lot of times we're trying to help clients, and these can be companies, organizations, sure, who are trying to tell their story. From your viewpoint, what are companies and organizations that are in the business world today not getting right in terms of the way they communicate?
Well, I'm sure that some are getting it right, but I think the ones that are not are the ones that are not understanding that what I just said, which is that you need to find a human connection of how people are really processing what you mean, what impact you have, how you differ.
So how does someone go from Salina, Kansas to being in 2 movies?
Well, my family was from Bartlesville, Oklahoma, and I'm very proud. I really call Bartlesville more my home and maybe Los Angeles than Salina. Salina, Kansas was where my dad was in boot camp. I lived there for 6 weeks, and I don't think I ever went back until I was like 24. But I think when I got into Los Angeles and went to UCLA, I had a lot of friends in the movie industry, and I was a political guy. I liked political writing. I liked political ideas. All my friends wanted to write scripts.
Right.
And I had a couple of friends, really good friends. One of my best friends was Darren Star, who created Sex and the City and Melrose Place. But we ended up being in the same literature classes. And one thing led to another is I'm around that world. And then I find myself, running a public affairs organization in Los Angeles called the Japan America Society, which was a, how to bow and pass a business card kind of club until I began inviting prime ministers and controversial people involved in U.S.-Japan relations. And one of my members became Michael Crichton. And Michael was a member. I didn't even know he was a famous writer, but he was a good friend. And then when he wrote the book Rising Sun, which I knew was going to be controversial after I read it, I thought it was his first-time book.
Right.
So when I read it, I said, uh-oh. Just shows how ignorant I am, because I saw the books he had written and I said, oh geez. And then I saw myself credited in the credits, and I said, that book was a very controversial one to be connected to if you're a director of a Japan America Society. So it changed my life. And Michael was the one who told 20th Century Fox then, and said, if you're going to make this movie, you need Steve Clemons. And so he got Phil Kaufman, the director of Unbearable Lightness of Being, The Right Stuff and all that, to hire me to be their technical advisor. And then I'm in the film for about 3 seconds, and I still get residual checks today. So
now, you were also in State of Play.
Yeah.
Tell me about Ben Affleck.
So State of Play, Ben Affleck was a great guy. When you're on set with him, and even off set, he's genuinely curious about politics. He was genuinely curious about the role that members of the media play in the political environment here. And he sat down with a number of us. So I was in the film largely as an extra in that case, with State of Play, with Russell Crowe and all that. It was just a really fun thing. Of course, it was a David Ignatius written novel that was turned into a movie. And Ben really impressed me with his just love of politics.
Steve Clemons, thank you very much for taking time to do this.
Thank you.